I ran out the front door with nothing but a backpack and a bruise already forming on my cheek. I didn't know it then, but that slap would be the last thing Gerald Talbot would ever do to me. Because by midnight, I would be sitting in the back of a black SUV across from a stranger who would say 5 words that unraveled 18 years of lies. Before I go on, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is Hillary, though for most of my life, I was forced to answer to Allison. I'm 21 now. Let me take you back to that Saturday morning, the day Gerald Talbot turned 55, and the last day I ever lived under his roof. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., like I did every Saturday. But this one came with a 2-page handwritten list Donna had left on the kitchen counter the night before. Sweep the patio. Arrange the folding chairs, 32 of them, one for each guest on Gerald's list. Press the tablecloth. Slice the lemons. Wash the Pottery Barn serving platters by hand, because the dishwasher leaves spots. Their house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Henrico County, Virginia. A 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured lawn Gerald paid someone else to mow, but told the neighbors I handled myself. Inside, the dining table was solid oak, seats 12, polished weekly by me. On the counter sat 2 cases of Napa Valley Cabernet and a 3-tier cake from a bakery that charged more for fondant than I earned in a week. My room was downstairs, not the finished basement, the storage closet next to the water heater. No window. A twin mattress Gerald had dragged from a curbside pile when I was 9. A wool blanket that always smelled like damp cardboard, no matter how many times I washed it. Megan's room was upstairs. Queen bed. Flat screen TV. A vanity mirror ringed with Hollywood bulbs. She was 23 and still lived at home. Still had her credit card linked to Gerald's account. Still didn't know how to boil an egg, because that was what I was for. I had spent 3 months saving for Gerald's gift. A real leather wallet from a department store downtown. $84. That might not sound like much, unless you're earning $11 an hour scrubbing sheet pans at a restaurant called Rosie's off Route 1. I wrapped it in craft paper because I couldn't afford a gift bag. I had no idea that wallet would be the last thing I ever gave him. Gerald came downstairs at 10. Powder blue Ralph Lauren polo with the oversized pony logo. Khakis creased like knife blades. Cologne so heavy I smelled it before I saw him. He inspected the patio like a general reviewing troops, nudged one balloon cluster 6 inches to the left, stared at the lemon slices floating in the water pitcher, and said, without even looking at me, they're uneven. Do them again. Donna appeared at noon. Hair blown out. Pearl studs. Linen dress from Ann Taylor that I'd steamed the night before. She ran a finger along the kitchen counter and whispered something to Gerald she probably thought I couldn't hear. She only got you something cheap. Just brace yourself. Megan showed up last. Of course she did. New dress. Fresh highlights. Heels clicking across the floor I'd waxed at 6 that morning. She handed Gerald an Apple Watch, Series 9, stainless steel, the one that retails for $700. Charged to the supplementary credit card he'd given her for emergencies. He opened it and beamed. Kissed her forehead. That's my girl, he told the first guests walking in. She always knows what her old man likes. He didn't look at me. He never did when other people were watching. I was the girl who carried trays, refilled glasses, wiped condensation rings before they could stain the coffee table. When one of Gerald's coworkers asked Donna, shouldn't Allison sit down and eat with us? Donna smiled warmly, the kind of smile that feels like a locked door, and said, oh, she likes to help. It's her way of showing gratitude. You know how it is with adopted ones. So I kept carrying trays. It happened during the gift opening. Gerald sat at the head of the table like it was a throne. 30 guests around him, neighbors, church friends, co-workers from the insurance agency he managed. Champagne flutes catching the glow of patio string lights. Megan perched on the armrest filming everything on her iPhone. Donna stood behind him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder, looking like a woman who had mastered her world. I stepped forward with the craft paper package. On the front, in my neatest handwriting, I'd written, Happy Birthday. Gerald weighed it in his hand. For a split second, I thought he might actually smile. He tore the paper open, pulled out the wallet, flipped it open, flipped it closed, and held it up like evidence in a trial. What kind of worthless junk did you give me? His voice cut clean through the chatter. Conversation stopped. Forks hovered midair. Someone set a glass down far too carefully. I saved for 3 months, I started. 3 months. And this is all you got. He stood up so fast the chair scraped across the flagstone. Even the dog gets better treats. And then he hit me. Open palm, left side of my face. The sound was sharp and flat, the kind that doesn't echo because it doesn't need to. My head snapped sideways. A champagne flute toppled and shattered on the patio. For a second, that was the only sound in the world. No one moved. Donna looked down at her plate. One of Gerald's coworkers studied his napkin. Megan bit her lip and kept filming. Only one person stood. Ruth Kessler, our 70-year-old neighbor. 5 feet tall and braver than anyone else there. Gerald, that was uncalled for. Stay out of my family business, he snapped. Ruth sat back down, but she didn't look away from me. And I have never forgotten that. I stood there, tasting copper, the wallet lying on the ground between us. And for reasons I didn't fully understand yet, a thought surfaced in my mind: that slap will be the best evidence the lawyers need. I didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but something inside me had started counting. I didn't go back to the party. I went to the storage closet, grabbed my faded navy JanSport backpack, the zipper fraying, the only thing that had followed me from high school, and packed what I could. 2 shirts, 1 decent pair of jeans, a toothbrush, a phone charger, the envelope I'd found months ago with a state logo I didn't understand. And from a shoebox under my mattress, $340 in cash, mostly 1s and 5s, tips from Rosie's that I'd hidden because Gerald monitored my bank account. $340. A backpack, a bruise turning purple, that was everything I owned. I walked through the living room on my way out. The party had resumed. Gerald was laughing, champagne in hand, the wallet nowhere in sight. Megan was showing guests something on her phone, probably the video. Donna stood at the window and watched me cross the yard. Then she reached for the curtain and pulled it closed. Nobody called my name. Outside, the October air hit my face, and the sting flared again. Henrico County at 9 p.m. is a different kind of dark. Not city dark, where there's always a lit storefront somewhere, but suburb dark. Streetlights spaced too far apart. Silence that feels intentional. I walked along Patterson Avenue with no destination. Just away. After about 2 miles, headlights slowed behind me. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. Virginia plates. It rolled to a stop 10 feet ahead. The rear door opened. I should have run. Every instinct said run, but I was so tired of running from things. For once, I decided to see what was running toward me. A man stepped out first. Mid-50s. Tall, lean, wearing a charcoal peacoat I'd later learn was Brooks Brothers. Not flashy, just tailored. Hair dark brown with threads of silver. And his eyes, hazel green, wide set, catching the streetlight, were exactly the same eyes I saw in my own reflection every morning. A woman stepped out behind him. Shorter, red hair, sharp features, carrying a leather portfolio like she'd walked straight out of a courtroom. Professional, watchful, the man's hands were trembling. "I'm sorry to frighten you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "My name is Richard Whitford. And I believe I am your biological father." I stepped back until my shoulders hit a mailbox post. "That's not possible. My biological parents didn't want me." "You were told wrong." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph, creased at the edges from being handled so often. A woman holding a toddler. The woman had auburn hair and cheekbones like mine. A smile that tilted slightly left. The toddler had hazel green eyes. "Her name was Catherine," he said softly. "She was your mother. She died in a car accident when you were 2. And I have spent every day since then trying to find you." I looked at the photo. Then at him. Then back at the photo. The woman had my mouth. My expression. Looking at her felt like finally remembering a word you've been searching for your whole life. The red-haired woman introduced herself. "I'm Margaret Hale, Mr. Whitford's attorney. We're not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. We've been monitoring your situation legally for several months. Tonight, when our investigators saw you leave the house, we decided it was the safest opportunity to approach." "You were watching the house?" I asked. She nodded. "There were many guests. It allowed us to confirm your identity safely. We also saw you run." Without thinking, I touched my cheek. The bruise pulsed under my fingers. Richard's gaze followed the movement, and something behind his eyes broke, quietly. We sat in the back of the Escalade. The heat running low. It was the warmest I'd been all night. Richard told me the story like someone who had rehearsed it for 18 years and still wasn't ready to say it aloud. Catherine died on I-64 eastbound on a Tuesday morning in March. A delivery truck crossed the median. She was killed instantly. Richard had been in the passenger seat. Shattered pelvis. Collapsed lung. 4 months in the hospital. While I was in the ICU, he said, Child Protective Services placed you in emergency foster care. Standard procedure. When he got out and filed to bring me home, he was told he couldn't. A social worker named Leonard Grubb presented the court with a signed voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, allegedly signed by Richard. I never signed anything, Richard said. I was on a ventilator. I couldn't hold a pen. But the court had a document with his name. The adoption was finalized. The file sealed. By the time he challenged it, it was too late. I hired investigators, he said quietly. Year after year, I would have spent everything. His voice didn't shake when he mentioned the money. It shook when he said everything. Margaret unfolded the envelope I'd been carrying for 6 months, the one labeled Virginia Department of Social Services. Inside was a partially redacted document, Title IVE Adoption Assistance Monthly Disbursement Summary. Allison G. Talbot. Margaret's expression shifted just slightly. This is an adoption subsidy record. The state of Virginia has been paying Gerald and Donna Talbot approximately $810 per month for your care. For 18 years. She looked at me. That's roughly $175,000. How much of that did you ever see? I thought of the curbside mattress. The windowless closet. The blanket that smelled like cardboard. None, I said. Richard turned toward the window, jaw clenched tight. All those years, I whispered, he called me a burden. But I wasn't a burden. I was a paycheck. Margaret drove us to a Hilton off Broad Street. Richard booked adjoining rooms under his name. Clean sheets. A window. I stood in the middle of that room and didn't know what to do. I opened the curtains and stared out at the parking lot lights for a long time. I hadn't looked out of a window from my own room in years. Memories came in layers. I'd been cooking family meals since I was 10. By 12, I was doing all the laundry, all the dishes, all the grocery shopping, on foot, because Gerald wouldn't drive me. Megan got a Toyota Camry for her 16th birthday. I got a bus pass that expired after a month and was never renewed. So I walked an hour and a half to Rosie's for my shifts. Gerald kept my documents from me. No birth certificate, no social security card, no ID. When I asked for a driver's license at 17, he said, "What for? You don't have anywhere to go." Now I understood. He'd designed it that way. 2 weeks before the party, he'd called me into his office. Mahogany desk, leather chair, books arranged by color. He slid a document across the desk, a voluntary agreement stating I chose to remain under his guardianship because I wasn't financially or emotionally prepared to live independently. It authorized him to continue managing all state and federal benefits tied to my care. Sign it, he said. Consider it my birthday gift. I didn't sign. That's why he hit me. It was never about the wallet. It was about control. The next morning at the Hilton, I woke up at 5 out of habit, heart racing, already mentally listing chores. Then I remembered. There was no list. Just white sheets. And a window. Richard knocked on the adjoining door, holding 2 cups of coffee. He sat across from me, not too close, not too far. Present, but careful, like he was afraid I might disappear again. Margaret arrived with a garment bag. Inside were new jeans and a cream cashmere sweater, still tagged. I changed and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. It was the first time in my life I'd worn something no one else had worn before me. When I stepped out, Richard's eyes went red around the edges. He didn't cry. He just nodded gently and said, Catherine had that same look. Like she was deciding whether to trust the mirror.